I think there's a few, sort of misconceptions, as you put it, that we come about, we hear fairly often. So first, I think, is that venture debt is just cheap equity, right? And believe me, nothing to be further from the truth. It is debt is debt. It is not cheap equity. It is always debt. It needs to be paid back and can be recalled under, certain circumstances. When we underwrite debt, we underwrite it with the expectation that our returns and our risks will be commensurate with debt and not with equity. But some types of debt can take equity-like risks from time to time.
Welcome to Prime Venture Partners Podcast, a podcast for entrepreneurs looking to build and grow their startups. Learn about uncommon strategies and common traps from makers and doers of startup ecosystem.
Welcome to the Prime Venture Partners Podcast. Today we have with us Ajay Hathangadi, Managing Director of Altiria Capital, a venture debt firm based out of India. Welcome to the show, Ajay.
Thanks, Amit. Thanks for having me.
Ajay, you've been around doing this for a while, almost 15 years. Silicon Valley Bank, which is known as the kind of legendary firm that started this whole venture debt category. Can you tell us just a little bit about your journey here in India?
Sure, yeah. So I actually started doing venture debt before I started with Silicon Valley Bank at Citibank. And that was kind of a 5-year mission to get it started. And I finally got it started in 2005. And I ran that product at Citi for 2 years. And then at the end of 2006, decided to leave to start an NBFC for Silicon Valley Bank. There was kind of the first initiative that Silicon Valley Bank had outside the US. And then I ran that business for about 10 years. Along the way, we did a buyout of the business, renamed it Innovent Capital in 2015, got Temasek and UOB Bank in as investors. And, subsequently left in 2017 to start Altiria Capital. And my co-founder Vinod Murli and I, who've come out together from Innovent/SVB, sort of launched Altiria, and that's what we do today.
Wonderful. Ajay, so let's talk a little bit about what is venture debt, right? A lot of our entrepreneurs and listeners are perhaps not very familiar with this, and some of them may be. Can you just give us a quick overview of what venture debt is?
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, the historical definition of venture debt was actually venture leasing, because that's how it started originally in the early 80s. When a leasing company that was doing equipment leasing basically got into providing that to startups as a way of helping them finance their growth. Today, however, that definition has expanded a little bit to mean any form of debt financing that's provided to a company that is still dependent on venture capital financing to fund its operations. So literally speaking, it covers a bunch of typical uses. So there's, equipment financing, or it can be used for financing equipment. It can be used for general corporate purposes, which is a euphemism for saying financing anything. It could be used for financing revenue growth, or for bridge between equity rounds, or for even refinancing existing debt. Perhaps the best way to illustrate what this is with an example, just taking some numbers here. So let's say you have a company that's raised a $5 million round of capital, and given that it's an early stage company still burning perhaps, let's say, $350,000 a month. So given that it's raised $5 million, it has, let's say, 15 months of life before the cash runs out. And within those 15 months, the whole idea is to scale the company to the next level of growth, make it ready for Series B, and in the process, basically hit some milestones that makes it more valuable, right? But generally, what tends to happen is that hitting those milestones takes sometimes more money, more time than originally anticipated. And the last thing that you want to do is to go into fundraising for Series B before your milestones are hit, because that means your valuation takes a knock. So what venture debt does is it provides some additional capital to extend the cash flow runway for the company, which gives it more time to hit those milestones. So in this case, the company has raised $5 million. Adding another $1 million of debt basically gives the company another 3 months of life, right? So the runway is extended from 15 months to 18 months. And those 3 months could often be the time that a company needs to hit its milestones and get more valuable. So very simply put, the real value proposition of venture debt is that it leverages equity capital in order to increase valuations between equity rounds, reduce dilution, and also therefore enhance founder and investor return in the process. There are also a few tangential benefits to this, Summit. So for example, it enhances the appearance of financial stability, for example, and staying power for prospective or existing customers when a company goes and approaches them. It could also help unlock restricted cash, in the form of rent deposits, for example. So there's multiple different uses of venture debt, and it can play into a number of use cases.
Absolutely. But one really important thing, Ajay, that you said, right? One, of course, it has to be tied with an equity round, or at least that company should have raised some reasonable amount of, venture equity capital. Is also the company's ability to service that debt, right? Because at the end of the day, it is debt. So you have to be able to pay the principal and the interest, and therefore nominally has to be a business which is generating some level of cash or cash flow to be able to service that.
So, that's how you might sort of traditionally think about it. But the real proposition of debt lies in the fact that it takes a look at the stock of cash the company has today, how it's, burning through that cash, and how that stock of cash gets replenished with Series B. And the debt is simply a tool which helps you to push those two apart as much as you can. So while the company may or may not have cash flow to repay it, it does have cash stock. And the question for a company is it better to, let's say, need servers, right? Let's say it needs equipment for $500,000. Now, is it better to pay that upfront, deduct that $500,000 from your $4 or $5 million raise, and buy that equipment upfront? Or does it make sense to defer the cost of the equipment over 3 years, knowing that somewhere in the process before the next 3 years, and certainly in the next 2 years, you'll end up raising more capital at a much better valuation? And therefore, the alternative is to keep that $500,000 in your bank account, use a line of leverage to finance the equipment, and keep that $500,000 because you might need it later at the end of month 15, 16, 17 to extend yourself a little bit more. So it does help for a company to have cash flow. It's unlikely companies that at this stage have positive cash flow. And what you're doing, therefore, is really using today's money to push out, further dilution from tomorrow's money. So in a way, you're giving yourself more time to get valuable.
Makes sense. How about we do a lot in fintech at Prime Ventures. Things like FLDG, right? Or, is there a restriction on where all you can use this venture debt for? In particular, let's talk about FLDG for fintech companies, because that is usually something that both the entrepreneurs and the VCs are a bit sensitive about in terms of not wanting to dilute the cap table for that.
Right. I mean, one of the aspects of venture debt is that there's typically no end-use restriction on what that money can be used for, right? Debt and the cash is fungible. So typically how companies tend to think about it is use your cash for the more core activities around your business. So R&D, for example, is a very core use, which pays itself back over a long period of time. So use equity for that and use debt for the more tactical spends that you have along the way, whether it's buying equipment, whether it is renting an office space, whether it is using it for rent deposits, whether it is using it for FLDG and so on. So the end use is really open and unrestricted. So you can use it for a number of things in concert with equity.
Understood. So as an entrepreneur, when should you consider taking debt, right, of this nature, just from a life cycle perspective? Let's say you're about to raise a Series A in another 3-6 months, or you've just raised it. Or is it just, like you said, on an opportunistic basis, saying, depending on wherever I'm in the cycle, assuming I qualify, we'll cover that later, you can raise it at any time, so to speak.
Let's understand what a startup is going to use that money for. Company should ideally raise capital when debt capital when it has the ability to repay that, right? So debt, unlike equity, carries an obligation to repay, which equity doesn't. I mean, equity then pays for itself in different other ways as a multiple of the exit and so on. But when you take debt as a founder, you're under obligation to return that back with principal and interest. So the question is obviously, when should a company feel that it has the ability to return that money with the principal and the interest? Companies at this stage, at an early stage, tend to have very uncertain cash flows in their business, right? And companies tend to do well in certain quarters and might have certain quarters that are flat or even down. And leverage can really help when a company is doing well. But when the company tends to flat, or when it has flat revenues, or when the quarter is bad, debt becomes an obligation that sometimes gets heavy. And so, generally speaking, a company should not raise equity unless it has the ability to tide through those temporary quarters or months of poor performance. So in our parlance, a company should take debt when it has one of two things going in its favor. Number one, if it has business cash flow that has enabled it to build a certain reserve of cash that can be used in tough times to continue to fulfill its loan obligation. That is one scenario when debt can be taken. Another scenario is in the absence of those cash flows. If the company has a stock of cash from Series A or Series B, when it has the ability to tide through those difficult times, that's another time that they can potentially take debt to take it. In the absence of these two events, then a company either has a cash, sufficient stock of cash from equity round or stock of cash that leads from business revenues, it's generally a bad idea to take debt. Because those few quarters when things go sideways and you're not able to meet your debt obligation, that creates a real burden on the company. And on top of everything else, the debt obligation can magnify the downside scenario for the company involved.
So do you, if I have to triangulate the company's own kind of expectation of value creation, of revenue generation, etc., should they think about that as well? So like you said, there are two parameters. One is these lumpy, capex, opex sort of one-off things that keep happening from time to time. Second is your cash that you already got on your balance sheet because of your, equity financing or otherwise. How about their own ability to grow revenues and predictability of that? Should that be a factor that should go into this, or you don't worry about it? Saying, look, if you raised 5 million Series A and you're only taking a 1 or 2 millions of debt, who cares, right? Like, don't worry about the predictability yet.
Right. I mean, as in all things, I think there is no one factor we look at. It's a combination of several things, right? The most important factor, of course, is the presence of an investor, the presence of, strong enterprise value in the company. And of course, the fact that the company has raised 5 million from a large top tier investor is an important factor for us. But the second question that we have to ask ourselves, and which is really the heart of the assessment we make, is what is the company's ability to raise future rounds of capital, of equity, right? Because the ability to raise further rounds of capital is what enables the company to stay liquid and therefore continue to repay its loan obligation. And when we assess that, aspects such as what is the business that the company is in? Is this a business that is likely to be interesting for investors 12 months, 15, 18 months down the road when the time comes to raise the next round? Is revenue generation an important element of that attractiveness of the company? Or is it one of those situations where the company is developing a new business model where it's about buying credibility and acceptability first, then followed by revenues? What is that parameter which keeps the company rolling forward and continuing to grow valuable? I think those are the aspects that we look at. So in that context, we look at how our revenue is scaling up. What is the track record? What is the trajectory looking like going forward? And how is the company positioned against all of these? And will it continue to remain attractive for someone 12, 18 months down the road?
Understood. So very interesting point. I didn't realize this, that in some sense, true to the term venture, even though this is venture debt, you're also evaluating companies which have the potential to grow into something much later, even if the actual cash flows or revenue generation and all that might have later, so long as it's got ability to grow into a valuation and to be able to raise subsequent rounds of capital.
That's right.
Okay.
Because at the end of the day, that's the only real assessment that any lender makes, which is irrespective of whether you're as a lender making a loan to an individual, to a large corporate or a startup, the only relevant questions are two. Number one is the willingness and the ability to repay a loan, right? So assume that willingness to repay the loan is not the issue because you have VCs on the board. The question is ability. And in large companies, you have collateral, you have, cash flow to kind of satisfy yourself with. In the case of lending to an individual, it's again, the person's income, their assets. In the case of startups, you really have very little to go on. I mean, you have to look at beyond the numbers, what is the company's business model and how attractive is it and how attractive will it continue to be? And that is the metric that you look at oftentimes to understand.
Understood. How about, Ajay, when should people reach out to folks like yourselves, right? From a timing perspective, is it when that opportunistic need arises, or is it around the Series A or B, or anywhere in between? Is how do you cultivate these relationships, and when do you kind of get into a actual engagement?
Yeah, look, the best time for a company to raise capital is alongside a Series A or a Series B. Like I said earlier, it's important that the company have a certain minimum threshold of capital that they've raised so that they have that reserve of cash that they can rely on to meet difficult times, difficult months, quarters, whatever. And ideally, it should be along with an equity round, because at the time of the equity round is when the company has the most amount of cash and therefore gives the most amount of comfort to a lender. And every subsequent month, as that level of cash reduces because the company is burning through it, the credit in a sense gets weaker. So the longer a company waits, the less that you have the ability to do as a lender for that company. So I'd say that the right time to engage with a lender is perhaps just ahead of a round closing, so that you're able to close the debt and the equity sort of co-terminus with each other. And it also gives the founder some sense of how much debt can they potentially raise so that they can right-size the overall fundraising that they're looking to get.
Ajay, this might be a naive question, but for companies that are raising like seed rounds, let's say $1 million, $1.5 million, is this sort of completely out of the question? Or do you guys also build positions where if somebody is raising a $1.5 million round, you might come in with a $500,000 debt, and then as the company grows, you might consider, or no, that like that $5 million is a little bit of a median kind of number?
I think for us, the assessment really is about who's putting the money in and what is the long-term interest from that investor to keep investing in that company. Now, in companies where, they've received a small amount of capital, you can define what small is, but let's, for argument's sake, call it $1 million. At that point, a lot of these 1 million checks are written more as experiments by the investors because they are not quite sure how the company is going to pan out. And, these are seed checks or early checks where you'll essentially write a few of these and see which ones then have sort of reached a level where you can then do a Series A. And then you'll follow through with a larger check in those instances. So there's still a lot of experimentation that is being done at that stage, which makes it very uncertain about whether the next round of capital will happen or not, right? And so what you have to look at is, as a lender, is ultimately going back, what is the confidence that you have that the investors will step in and provide more capital 12, 18 months from now? And if it's an experiment for which $1 million is being invested, very hard to read into that, right? So typically for us, 5 million is, it's not a hard threshold, but it's generally a sort of a softer number that we have in our minds, because at $5 million, there's a serious indication of interest from the investor that they want to follow through, that they think this is an opportunity worth investing in and scaling up. And therefore, as a lender, we have some reasonable amount of confidence that more money will come in. So for us, we've done deals earlier as well. It's just a matter of drawing a line and saying at what size of investment are we comfortable with.
Makes sense. Let's go on the flip side. What are the downsides of taking venture debt, right? And when should you absolutely not take it as an entrepreneur, even if you have the option to?
So I would say we've, I think, clarified already that you shouldn't take it unless you have the threshold of cash. But let's assume you have that threshold of cash and you've raised a $5 million round, right? The situation then I would say you should perhaps avoid is if there is an element of sort of binary risk about the survivability of your company, where, for example, you may be doing R&D on a new program or a new product, and it's not certain that the product will work. And if the product doesn't work, the company will fail. Or if there's an element where the company needs a certain license to operate, and getting that license is contingent on the funding coming in, for which the funding has been raised, but there's no guarantee that the license will come in, either on time or at all. So in those situations, if the product doesn't work or if the license doesn't happen, then the company's life, in a sense, is terminated at that point. So there's no further capital that can come in. And then on top of everything else, you don't want to have the obligation of an unpaid debt on your head. So I'd say save those kinds of binary situations. I would say practically any type of company, can benefit from taking debt.
Understood. Now, switching gears as to how you underwrite the risk. I know we've covered a little bit of it, but whether it's Altera or some of your other fellow competitors or whatever, in terms of how do you guys decide beyond just, of course, all these things we've talked about, right? Cash flow, amount of equity raised, etc. Who to fund or not? Is it a very venture-like process, like how we would be deciding at a seed or a Series A in terms of evaluating the business, the teams, etc.? What are some of the things that you guys look for here?
Right. So the process is different than how a VC would look at it. Our approach is really one of underwriting debt or the credit, and so forth. There's a more lender-like diligence process that we run. So there's a few elements we look at. Like I mentioned, the first very important element we look at is whether it's backed by a top-tier venture capital firm. I think that's one of the most important preconditions for us. Now, the reason for that is that VCs provide a strong layer of capital, active role on the board of these companies, and additional equity reserves, all of which support our debt position. right? Also, remember, we do not take board positions. We do not take observer rights. And, the VC on the board is actually our proxy for the eyes and ears in the deal. So that's a very important one. And we have over time worked with several VCs in the market. We've developed this great level of trust with them. And that's a very important aspect of underwriting process. The second one is in the absence of cash flow and collateral, enterprise value becomes a very important metric to determine the value of the company. And so a company raising $5 million in the previous example at a $20 million valuation, right? So with the VC investing in the company is ascertaining or ascribing a value of 20 million to the company. To me, my debt of 1 million is supported by that assessment that the company is worth at least 20 million today. And as long as the company continues to do what it's doing well, 20 goes to 21, to 22 and 23, and it gives me additional comfort to underwrite the process. The third thing is, I think, as I mentioned earlier, good cash reserves following a VC round essentially translates into lower repayment risk for us on the debt side. So, which is why we like to come in alongside a Series A, Series B, whatever you call it, when the cash reserves are at their best, which is when we can put our best foot forward and give the best terms to the company. The next one, by the way, on that again, the one other thing is that we typically want companies to have at least 12 months of cash when we look at them. And the reason for that is that, the runway of at least 12 months gives the company enough time to demonstrate business growth and position itself for further equity raise. Right? So a company with, say, 3 months of cash or 4 months of cash, unless it's already fairly advanced in the equity round, might take a little bit longer than, the next 3 to 4 months to raise. And that carries its own risk, right? Bridge loans, therefore, is something that we generally don't do. So that carries the highest risk in terms of all the deals, the types of deals that we do. I think the other thing we look at is, of course, whether the company is high growth, but that would stand to reason if the VC is in it, because high growth companies increase the ability of the company to raise its next equity round, remain attractive for investors and so on, again, which ensures that the debt obligation is not compromised. And obviously, finally, I think it's the presence of a great team that's very important, because it's the ability of that team to execute. Its ability to execute is really what's critical, I think, to the long-term survival and growth of the company. So when we look at a deal, we look at all of these 5 parameters, 6 parameters, whatever, and we need to know that it clears all of these hurdles for it to qualify essentially from a loan draw. And the last part of the process is, of course, a touch and feel with the VC involved to understand their rationale for the investment and, what they want the company to achieve in the next 12 months. What is the plan underwritten to? What is the milestones that need to be achieved to get to the next round of funding? So unless the VC is absolutely comfortable with us being there in the debt, in a debt capacity, we generally will not extend the debt, because we need to make sure that all 3 of us, the founder, the VC, and us, are all sort of rowing in the same direction, right? So I'd say broadly, these are the aspects to look at.
Very, very good. So switching gears, talking a little bit about some practical tips and some basic numbers, right? Maybe, I know these are, your mileage may vary, but what are the typical kinds of, interest rates and equity warrants and durations and so forth for these kinds of instruments? Again, let's just take a prototypical example, sticking with the 5 million round, raising $1 million or $1.5 million in venture debt. Yeah. What would a typical thing be like for founders who want to evaluate whether they want to consider this?
Yeah, I mean, there are essentially 3 components to our structure. The first is the debt component, which is usually a 2-year to 3-year kind of loan structure or a debt investment structure. The debt carries a monthly repayment of principal, monthly repayment of interest. The monthly repayment nature is therefore primarily making sure that, we are able to manage our risk in the deal. And we don't make it too cumbersome for the company to end up paying the entire loan back in one balloon repayment, which then gets very difficult to do. So chop it up into bite-sized pieces, spread that across 2 or 3 years. And so companies generally pay us on a monthly basis. Usually there is an initial period of when just the interest is payable and then the principal becomes repayable thereafter, a few months or so. The interest rates are typically in the mid-teens, so about 14.5% to 15% in that range. That's the debt component. The debt also comes in without requiring any promoter guarantees, any guarantees from the VC. It's generally as a secured loan to the assets of the company. And so we are actually often the first and only lender to the company at that stage. So generally we take a pledge over all of the assets in the company. The second aspect are the warrants, or the partly paid shares in our case, where we have a right to buy a certain number of shares at a predetermined price, which is actually the Series A price. If we come along with the Series A price. And usually the warrants are taken for between 10 and 15% of the amount of the loan equivalent. So if I'm giving $1 million loan in this case, the $1 million loan itself is repayable over, call it 3 years at 15%. And then we get warrants for about $100,000 to $150,000, where the strike price is set equal to the Series A price. That's the second component. And those are generally longer term options, Amit. And the idea there is for us to make an upside when the company gets more successful as a way of claiming back some of the commercials in the deal for the risk that we take in the transaction. Obviously, we are not going to want to load 20% or 25% interest rate on the company, because then it becomes more of a burden to a company than a help. The idea is to price the loan at, say, 15%, and the balance upside to make it contingent on whenever the company and the founder and the VC make money, then we stand to make a little bit of an upside. And hopefully on a portfolio basis, we can get a few more percentage points of return with some of the warrant gains that we make. The third element of our structure is usually a small right to co-invest at the next round, which is up to a max of $1 million. And it's on the same terms and conditions as the next round. We use that very judiciously because, our essential approach to the transaction is more debt risk, and we don't want to add too much of equity risk into our portfolio. So we use that very sparingly. In fact, in our current fund, we've made only about 3 investments of that nature. And we fully recognize that we are better credit underwriters than we are equity investors. We're not really equity investors in that sense. But that's more of an ability for us to get an opportunistic upside for some of the companies where we see, we've been there a while, we've seen how the company has tracked, and we think there's a way to make a little bit of an extra upside there. So those 3 components together is what constitutes our engagement with you.
Great. How about some kind of myths and misconceptions about this category? Like, what are some of the things you hear and laugh about or dismiss summarily?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few, sort of misconceptions, as you put it, that we come about, we hear fairly often. So first, I think, is that venture debt is just cheap equity, right? And believe me, nothing to be further from the truth. It is debt is debt. It is not cheap equity. It is always debt. It needs to be paid back and can be recalled under certain circumstances. When we underwrite debt, we underwrite it with the expectation that our returns and our risk will be commensurate with debt and not with equity. But some types of debt can take equity-like risk from time to time, especially in bid situations, as we talked about. But they will be priced accordingly, and that is not the debt that we are talking about. So, type and the amount vary based on sort of capitalization, the stage of development, other factors. But I think the bottom line is that venture debt is underwritten very much in the style of traditional lending, except that the metrics that we use to determine and to satisfy ourselves is very different from the one that traditional lenders use. So I think that's one important aspect. So companies should be very clear about the expectations on debt when they take it. It is intended to be debt and repaid, and the obligations it creates are as such. The second one is that the misconception that venture debt doesn't really add runway, that I'm really borrowing on my own cash, right? And I think that, I think venture debt can and often does add runway. The issue of when it doesn't add runway, when this misconception comes in, is mainly when borrowing from lenders that require companies to either maintain excessive liquidity covenants or which require companies to keep cash deposits with them against which they lend, right? So liquidity covenants being, where a lender would say that, look, you need to have an X amount of cash in your bank, even though that bank account is not with us, but you need to have a certain amount of X amount of cash with you at all on hand at all times. Otherwise, it's a breach of covenant. And that really forces you to keep that cash, unproductively. And at some point, you will have an issue where your cash balance goes lower. And then you have to scramble to either repay that loan or to raise more equity. And of course, several banks then ask to keep deposits, which also can, then you're not really adding fresh debt into the equation beyond the point. Whereas genuine lenders have no problem as long as the company continues to be attractive to VCs, raise further rounds, in which case the debt can be genuinely structured to provide good, strong cash runway. So I would say watch out for cheap deals with excessive liquidity covenants or where deposits are required, which are not really adding to runway. And if I may add, Amit, the third aspect, the last one, just to pick on, is that the misconception that all Ds of a certain type are created equal. And I think that's, from my experience, that's one of the big ones, because there can be significant differences between similar looking offers. What you have to look at is the amount that is being offered, the factors that determine availability of how the company will draw on that facility. You need to look at the all-in cost, the timing of the expenses, things like interest calculations, prepayment penalties. And another important one is collateral and sacrifice of future decision-making flexibility, right? Because of all the constraints that lenders sometimes tend to put. And there's a whole bunch of subjective factors that we can get into about how do you assess the lender and how do you, in a sense, quote unquote, get married to the lender, because that has a huge bearing on your continued ability to, run the company as a company once you've taken a debt from a lender. So I would say these three are the top three that I would pick as sort of misconceptions out there on venture debt.
Wonderful, Ajay. Very enlightening, and I really feel like you demystified some of these. So thanks again so much, Ajay, for being on the podcast.
Pleasure, Amit. Pleasure to be here.
Dear listeners, thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast. Subscribe now on your favorite podcast app for free, and you'll be the first one to know when new episodes are available. Just search for Prime Venture Partners Podcast in Apple Podcast, Spotify, Castbox, or however you get your podcasts. Then hit subscribe. And if you have enjoyed the show, we would be really grateful if you leave us a review on Apple Podcast. To read the full transcript, find the link in the show notes.